Welcome to episode 32 of the Virtual GM. On this episode, we are going to give you a recap of the hospitality show that just ended here in Las Vegas, Hospitality Show 2024. And then I'm also going to give you 3 tips to maximize any networking or conference that you can go and attend. And let's get started. So as you can see, I am here by myself, but I need to do a segue still. We want to stay true to our level 10 and EOS form, the entrepreneurial operating system. And I have a really fun segue. My personal is that Megan and I just got back from a 4-day trip down to Scottsdale. We were supposed to go to a country concert, but unfortunately that got canceled. But we had my mom coming in, we had a babysitter, we had the time off of work, so we thought, let's still do something fun. Went down to Scottsdale and stayed at the Senna House, which is a part of the Hilton Curio collection, and it was just absolutely amazing. The restaurant there, AHLA, the food was incredible, the atmosphere was excellent, the design of the hotel was just really, really impressive. Megan loved it. The location was wonderful, and we just did a full golf trip. We went to Topgolf the first night. We played 18 holes at Silverado Golf Club the next day. Then that night we went to a thing called Putt Shack, which is like an adult indoor putt-putt, which was so fun. And then the next day we played my favorite course in Scottsdale, the Phoenician, played 18 holes there, and then headed back to Vegas so we could take that drive, break it up in half, and stayed at the Waldorf there in Vegas and went to STK at the Cosmopolitan and had an amazing dinner. It was just so nice to get away and have all that time with Meg. And the great thing about golf is it's 5 hours outside in the sun with no electronics. And honestly, it was just one of the funnest trips we've ever been on. We absolutely loved it. And then, of course, my work best was being at the hospitality show. And I don't need to spend a whole lot of time talking about that because that's all I'm going to talk about on the episode. So we'll just jump right into that. Hello and good morning. Welcome back to another episode of the Virtual GM podcast. I am your host, Cody Adent, and today I am flying solo on episode 32. We had some technical difficulties with our audio connection, and Spencer had some big sales calls he had to get on, so I stayed back and I'm going to record this one solo. The reason we wanted to make sure we still did an episode today is because we just got back from the hospitality show in Las Vegas. Something unique that I didn't know is it was actually the first hospitality show that they've ever done. So it was year number 1. And I got to say, it was absolutely incredible. There was over 2,500 people there. They had a huge expo. They certainly didn't spare any expense in putting the event on. And I was just overly impressed. We really didn't know what to expect. We'd never been before, obviously, because it was the first, but there were some really amazing takeaways. And then, of course, some opportunities as well. So we just wanted to give you guys a rundown of that show. Next year is in October. I think it's maybe the 24th through the 28th in San Antonio. So you're going to want to keep an eye out for that. I do highly recommend after going to year 1 that if you didn't go this year, you're going to want to do that. And I'll kind of just tell you a little bit about the show. So what they did a great job of was registration was easy. They allowed you to share that you're going to the hospitality show on LinkedIn, which I think was brilliant because it was super easy to do that. Then it let your network know that 1, this show was happening, and 2, that you were going to be there. Their communication leading up to and during was also excellent. Sometimes you'll go to a show, and we've talked about on this podcast with Grow with Video, there were times that we didn't really know what the agenda was or where we were supposed to be or what the plan was. A hospitality show was not like that at all. There was always, in fact, there was an overload of communication, as well as I've never had so many people reach out for meetings. So obviously they did a great job of sharing their registration list with the different vendors and the people who had the space in the expo, because I got so many people reaching out asking to go to the event. So they did a great job with that. Day 1, we got there in the afternoon. Check-in was super easy and seamless, really well done. Badges were just paper, which was surprising just because it was a 3-day event. So that badge had to really brave the elements. I thought that there would be something like a little bit more significant than that, but overall, not a problem. Registration, like I said, was easy. We got through it really quick. They had this amazing space. It was at the Venetian in Las Vegas, which has an incredible expo venue. And so when you got your registration, to the left was the huge expo area. We weren't able to go into it that day, but they also had a bar built into that, which was cool with tables. So if you wanted to have some side conversations or meetings, they had a great spot for that with some cocktails. And then that night, they had the opening network event, and it was at Tao. And so Tao was in the Venetian, and I want to say, I'm pretty sure it is the number one grossing restaurant in the world. It's a restaurant and a nightclub. It truly is one of the funnest and best establishments in Vegas. Then the next day, we got to the event. The morning, they had a big main stage area where they had different like breakouts, and then they ended with a keynote. The keynote was Kat Cole. She is currently the COO of Athletic Greens. And she had an amazing story, starting from a waitress at Hooters, working her way all the way up through that company to be in a high C-suite level. I'm not sure if she got to president or not, to becoming the president of Cinnabon, on to now the president of Athletic Greens. And she shared amazing stories with great storytelling ability and interesting perspective on questions we can be asking our staff to be more engaged. So that was a great takeaway. And the breakouts were good. They started a little dull, to be honest. And the acoustics weren't very good in the very first couple. So that was a little bit of a letdown, but the first keynote of that day was incredible. And then they opened the expo at noon, which had its pluses and minuses because it was nice that the expo wasn't open, so they had a large audience inside for the keynotes. But certainly, I'd imagine the expoees would have liked more time. But they did like a grand open or a ribbon cutting ceremony and open up to the expo, which was huge. There were so many vendors there. So that was really great. And then the rest of the afternoon, which I thought was creative, is all of the breakouts took place at different stages throughout the expo. So you spent the whole afternoon in that expo space. And then that rolled right into the networking event that evening, which was in that same area I talked about for registration, where they had that bar. And so that's where that networking event was. And that one was way superior because you were actually able to have conversations. And so we met some really great contacts. Thanks to Stash, we got to meet the group from Visit BC, Ingrid and Sam, and they were just amazing. We're really excited to work with them. We're going to be joining their tourism bureau, and Ingrid was so fun to talk to and great to get to know, someone we hope to have on as a guest. And BC someplace we'd love to be. Obviously, Soyan Tula is there. And what was so funny is we had just met Ingrid, just started this conversation about how can we support each other and how can we play a role in each other's businesses. And not less than 10 minutes later, she brings a gentleman over named Raheem and says, I was just in line to get a drink at the bar and I met Raheem. He was telling me about what he's doing and I wanted to introduce him to you. And then she kind of looks at me and winks and says, like, that's the universe for you. And that's referral number one. And it was this like really serendipitous moment. And so I start having a conversation with Raheem and I look down and see that he's from Albuquerque. So I was like, oh, are you familiar with Hotel Zaz? You know, obviously the coolest hotel in Albuquerque. I know he's got to know it. And he goes, yeah, of course. Charmine's my cousin. So it was just like, we just start dying laughing because this stranger that we just met happens to be the cousin of this brand new property we just started working with in Albuquerque. So Spencer's like, we got to get a picture and send it to her. So we all get in, take the selfie. Spencer sends it to Charmine and then she FaceTimes Raheem. And it was just like, just such an amazing experience to see this space and hospitality that we've really made like a genuine effort to be involved in, and to have all these touch points collide at once. It was really quite a scene. And so he's FaceTiming her and she's like, these are the guys I told you about on my birthday. And then we got into it with Raheem and he told us about this project he's developing in Albuquerque, probably a soft flag, 120 room property, which we certainly hope we'll be able to work with him on. We were showing him the deck for De Novo and Nariv and kind of showing him the things that we can do from a branding and execution standpoint. And ultimately, he was just a really awesome person. And I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to work with him. And then so during that, after that happened, they had Chad Ochocinco, the receiver from the Bengals, come do like a Q&A, which was cool in the sense of like, oh, there's this famous person here. That's cool. But didn't really have any value from a hospitality standpoint. And the Q&A was kind of hard to hear. We actually just kind of avoided it. So I think they did a great job of creating amazing experiences, but they weren't necessarily driven towards like what your end goal might be for an event. So I think that people who attended especially if you work for a company and they paid to send you here and you got that experience in Tao and you got to meet Chad Ochocinco, all of those things are really cool and would make you go back to your bosses and leaders and say like, yeah, I want to go back next year. But a couple of those things didn't really have the value that you'd want from the bottom line, but very, very fun. And then the next day was more of the same, open up on the main stage with breakouts. And these ones were actually really good. I really enjoyed the second day. They had two amazing keynotes. Paul Z, who works for IBM, and he talked about all of AI. So I think his talk was like AI, the good, the bad, and the Chat GPT. And he was unbelievably brilliant. And he gave such great examples of how AI is being used, should be used, shouldn't be used, what the pros and cons are. Just an absolutely mind-blowing keynote, really. And hopefully, I don't know if AHLA or the hospitality show is going to like put the digital content of these up, but I would go and look for it because that 1 hour was unbelievably beneficial. And then they had Admiral William McRaven. He is the best-selling author of Make Your Bed and Wisdom of the Bullfrog. And so he was the SEAL commander in charge of the SEAL team that ultimately took down Osama bin Laden. And he was also the commander. I can't remember what the movie's called, but with Tom Hanks and like the those big ships in the ocean, the container ships, and it was taken over by Somalian pirates. And you know, the movie where he goes, "I'm the captain now." So that movie, he was the SEAL commander in charge of that, of recovering that ship as well. So he just has this incredible story. And really what was so interesting, talking about the concept of make your bed and how important it is to start your day with a victory, which obviously for me with winning the moment, I really connected to that. But he made a great point of, because he was so curious as to why they were spending so much time, you know, like 45 minutes a day on getting, you know, perfect at making beds. And he was like, I get the uniform and I get this and I get that, but I just don't understand why we're spending so much time making our bed. And the commander at the time said, well, if we can't trust you to do the easiest tasks, how can we trust you to execute the most complicated ones? And it was a real aha moment of like, wow, that's, you know, well, for one, I firmly believe that. And for two, like, what a great perspective. And he did such a good job of tying it back to hospitality and talking about the things that you can do within our business to really make a difference. And so it was great. So I highly recommend the book. A couple other takeaways. In one of the keynotes, it was they're talking about the talent inside of hospitality and the need to fill roles. And we talked a lot about virtual AI type capabilities, but someone gave this amazing statistic and I don't remember it verbatim, but I'll do the best to relay what he said. So he said that he was reading, I think it was an article in the Harvard Business Review Journal talking about hiring rates throughout the United States, and hospitality is hiring at a rate of speed double that of the industry average. So twice as much as anyone else in the industry. But what is amazing about that, which is obviously a positive, throughout hospitality as a whole, we still have, out of every 10 positions we have, 4 of them are open. So basically 40% of our roles globally as hospitality in the United States are not filled, even though we're hiring at twice the speed of anyone else. So it really just goes to show how much recovery we still have from a staffing perspective since 2020. So it's a void we have yet to fix. And I think it's a big part of why you're seeing such an increase in the use of AI and things like that, because we've got these needs that we've got to fill. And Paul Z, when he was giving his talk, the gentleman from IBM, he was talking about taking those rudimentary tasks, you know, that aren't skilled, using AI to accomplish that, while taking that same resource of time and human capital and putting them to more complicated tasks, which I thought was a great way of explaining that. Inside of the expo, a couple interesting takeaways that we had. We saw some of our friends from ByTax, so that was really fun to reconnect with those people that we'd made relationships with in San Diego. Big shout out to Fresh Smoking Sensors, our boy Matt. It was great to see him again. We talked about him on the podcast before, so it was fun to see him. What was interesting is Motel 6 had an incredible booth there, and Marriott's was like a very small, insignificant, like what you would imagine a startup company to have. So that was interesting. There was an app that won an award called Verdi, which is kind of like the virtual GM stuff that we do, but through an app. And so that was an interesting thing. And they won one of the best development awards. And let's see what other takeaways were there. That was pretty much it from the expo. We didn't have a ton of success connecting with great vendors in the expo space, but it certainly was fun to see the people that we'd made other connections with. And overall, I absolutely, if I was to rate the conference as a whole on a scale of 1 to 10, I think I'd give it an 8. I mean, it was awesome. It was a great conference. We had some awesome takeaways. And for their first year, I mean, blown away with what they're able to achieve and the amount of investment that went into it. I mean, really, it was executed so well, and you can tell they didn't spare any expense. So they did just a phenomenal job. And we will certainly be in San Antonio next October. We will be there. So we want to give, as always, 3 takeaways. So what we're going to do today is the 3 takeaways that you need, or the 3 tips, for any conference that you go to. So tip number 1 is your pre-arrival preparation. So like I forgot to bring enough business cards, right? So obviously shame on me. Luckily, Spencer and Kyle both had enough, but I certainly didn't. We ended up making badges for the Virtual GM podcast, but we thought about the idea as we were driving down to Vegas. And luckily, Emily's a rock star and was able to get them created, get them printed so Brett could bring them down the next morning. But those are all things like we should have had a pre-conference huddle to say, okay, let's have our business cards, let's have our marketing materials. And something that we thought about too that we could have done is we could have had vibrant yellow t-shirts with do you want to know who we are, and a QR code to the podcast, or something unique to bring attention to ourselves. So tip number 1 again is your pre-arrival meeting. Figure out what it is you're going to do. Be ready to execute that conference to the best of your ability. Number 2 is all of your pre-connections. So some people did really great with this, getting on LinkedIn, finding out who is going, reaching out, setting meetings. But you want to make sure that if you're there, you're going to make the most of your time. And there's so much you can do before you arrive from a connection standpoint to be ready to execute and get the most out of the event. And then number 3, this one should be easy, but I see so many people not do it. Really execute the event. If it starts at 8, be there at 8. If it has the networking events, go to it. It can be exhausting. I mean, on Wednesday, we went from 8 o'clock in the morning when it started till 10 o'clock at night because we participated in all of the events. And then the other thing that we did is leverage your relationships. So we went to dinner with Stash, and then they brought the team from Visit BC. And you really want to be able to use that, like the 6 degrees of separation, right? Where I know someone and they know someone and they know someone to make your sphere of influence larger. And so just really take the event on and execute it all the way. Don't come late. Don't leave early. Don't skip out on networking events. Really immerse yourself in the convention and get the most out of it. I think if you do those 3 things, you're never going to have an unsuccessful conference. And that really wraps it up. That is our review of Hospitality Show 2023 in Las Vegas. I want to thank Utia. Utia helped make it possible for us to go to this event. I want to thank AHLA. And of course, I want to thank the Hospitality Show and our partners, Stash, for making the event just such an enjoyable experience. And like I said, go to the website. I think it's hospitalityshow.com. Just Google that. You'll find it, and make sure you have all the information to register for next year's event. And with that, I'll just say thank you so much for listening, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your week.